Now, I am Dustin Baker, and we are 6 days away from roster trim downs around the NFL. About 700 players will hit free agency. Unbelievably, it's a huge pool that will arrive. And then we got the final preseason game before that on Saturday at Philadelphia. It's a joy that we get to play that game in the preseason and not again in the regular season. But we are here with our typical, he's back in the fold for the long haul, Wednesday guest, Josh Frey. What up, mine?
I'm doing all right, man. You mean last week of preseason, college football week 0 this weekend? Football's back, baby. I'm excited about it. There's a little bit of a crisp in the air.
Yeah, it truly is. And I think once we get to next week with the finally get for the guys and gals that are obsessed with this, like us, when we get a 53-man roster, it'll really feel like God, we're so damn close if we're not already. And then we want to get a little snazzy today with some graphics on the roster projection from Josh. So producer Tyler is joining us. He's going to have pizza in the middle of the show, it sounds like. But how are you, Tyler?
I'll wait to eat my pizza till after the show, but I am cooking a beautiful Jack's pizza at the moment. I am doing fantastic. Absolutely.
And you're riding the wave of Jaren Hall's sweet performance, are you not?
Absolutely. I have a bet with some random person on Twitter that if Matt Corral sticks around on the 53-man roster to week 18, I'll give him $25 because I don't see it happening at all.
Yeah,
it's like, you're not going to give Matt Corral a chance? No.
Yeah, we're going to find out what Josh thinks, but I don't think that Corral will even make it through next week. But, he got a raw deal last weekend, given one passing attempt that looked buffoonish. Should have just let him. I was thinking, just let him uncork it once, and then they did. And I was like, why did they do that? So, yeah, I got on my high horse. All right, well, we're going to do this because the roster will drop on Tuesday. It's going to reduce by 42%, 91 players to 53. We have Josh on, and we are going to systematically go through his roster projection, and then Tyler and I will provide commentary, challenge him on a couple things, and go from there. So we are going to start at the top of the ticket, which has gone through a absolute roller coaster in the last week, an awful roller coaster. Josh, we have your quarterbacks on screen. I want you to tell me, there's not much mystery at 1 and 2. There better not be, but tell me with Tyler, about to pounce. No, I think he'll be happy with this. Tell me why Jaren Hall over Matt Corral.
Well, first of all, I just think he's a Vikings draft pick. First and foremost, he's been in Kevin O'Connell's system. He knows it a lot better than Matt Corral, who's been there for like 3 days at this point. And obviously the JJ McCarthy injury took a lot of, and at least in my opinion, a lot of mystery out of exactly who's going to make this final roster. Obviously, Darnold's the starter. Nick Mullins, veteran, he's going to be QB2. Jaren Hall, I think there is still some upside to him. I refuse to completely give up on Jaren Hall, and we saw some of that come to fruition on Saturday. So I think that he's earned a spot on this roster at this point, especially if McCarthy's going to be out for the entire year. And Corral, I mean, I loved him coming into the 2022 draft, but obviously it didn't work out in Carolina. And he's just kind of had a little bit of a raw deal so far, like you said, to this point in his NFL career. And I think if anything, he's going to land on a practice squad somewhere, and he's going to have to wait at least another year or two to finally get a shot to make a roster here. So I think this is pretty much set in stone, in my opinion, in terms of who's going to make the final roster for the Vikings.
It's one of the least suspenseful spots of this show and on this depth chart by the absolutely dreadful meniscus tear. Of course, that would happen to Vikings fans and the Vikings franchise. But Tyler, this is your shot. Give us Jaren Hall's speech.
Yeah, quarterback 3 for now, but give it a year or so. If the Vikings are looking for a conditional 7th round pick, they can ship out Nick Mullins, and Jaren Hall can eventually work his way into being the backup with upside. Kind of, I'm not saying they're the same player, but sort of the Davis Mills situation where I don't think Texan fans are complaining anytime Davis Mills has to play a couple of games if Stroud were to ever get hurt. I kind of see the same thing with Jaren Hall, where if he reaches his potential, he's a high-end backup in this league, and there's still a lot of that potential. So why not just keep him on the roster as the 3rd quarterback, see if he can't develop into a backup here.
It's so wild how a preseason game can swing momentum. Like after the first one, Hall didn't look too dazzling. So on folks' 53-man roster projections, because McCarthy was still there, it's like, oh, he's a goner. And then he looked good in the next preseason game. This is what happens to rookies, albeit older ones in his case. And we're right back. And we're like, oh, yeah, he's going to make it over Corral, because why wouldn't he? So, all right, again, probably the least mysterious spot on this depth chart projection. Let's get to running back, which might be a little bit more complicated. Josh, what do you got? Who are the running backs? Looks like you included the fullback as well.
Yes, I did. CJ Ham is in there because he absolutely has earned a roster spot for the last, 10 years at this point. So I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon until he finally decides to call it quits for his NFL career. But obviously, Aaron Jones at the top of the depth chart. I don't think there's too much debate there at this point. Ty Chandler at number 2. I think those guys are going to be they're going to be sharing the majority of the snaps to that running back position this year. But Kanae Nwangwu, obviously, my big question with him coming into training camp was, is he going to be able to hold up it with the new kick return rules? And we haven't really gotten a chance to see him return kicks at this point, but in the actual offense, he's looked great. 12 carries. Yeah, 12 carries for like 90 yards and a touchdown. I'll take that any day of the week. And Nwangwu's finally showing some things in the offense. And the fact that he hasn't had to return kicks yet at this point kind of says to me that the Vikings trust his ability to hold down that spot with the special teams. So if nothing else, he's gonna continue doing that. And if he gets some extra snaps in the offense moving forward, that's just icing on the cake at this point. Myles Gaskin, I think, has looked really solid so far in preseason as well. But with it being a 53-man roster, I had to make a cut at some point. So I'm going to keep the upside of Nwangwu over basically what we already know in terms of what Gaskin is, basically a borderline RB2 kind of RB3 type at this point in his NFL career. So I'll stick with Nwangwu. And Dwayne McBride, 7th round pick last year. And I never saw it to begin with. And I haven't seen anything so far that really changes my mind all that much. So this is how I'm rolling with the running backs going into the year.
How do you feel about Nwangwu in that spot? Would you rather them explore Kareem Hunt, or if Cam Akers gets cut? Would you rather them explore an alternative option, or are you good with this?
I think I'm good with this. Maybe things change if Aaron Jones or Ty Chandler suffer an injury and they need to go find another veteran, just because at this point, Nwangwu still hasn't seen a ton of real NFL football in the offense at this point in his career. But like I said, all signs in preseason seem like he's taking another step forward in his career. So as for right now, I feel pretty confident in this RB room, and they're going to play a pretty huge role in Kevin O'Connell's offense.
One thing I wanted to point out before I get Tyler's take on the RBs here is, in Green Bay, Aaron Jones was never an absolute workhorse. That's why he's still playing competently rather than Dalvin Cook, who's looking for a job, is because of the tread on the tires, if you will. So although we consider him the RB1 solution, and he's not going to get 28 carries per game. That is not what Aaron Jones has ever been. And I don't think that they're going to start doing that with him knocking on the door of age 30. So I would preface to Vikings fans, although you should be excited about Aaron Jones, this will probably be more split equitably between Chandler and Jones, unless the Vikings fundamentally change the way that Jones has done business since 2017. Tyler, any disagreements on the RB room?
Yeah, I'm not as confident in Kene as Josh is. To me, there's a large hole at RB3. I was kind of surprised that the Cam Akers signing didn't go through. It looked like he was going to sign here. He was working out here. ESPN reported on their wire that he signed here, and that next thing you know, he's a Texan because they like stealing all our players. I think Kene is a fine special teams return guy. Yeah, and you saw some explosiveness from him when he was when the Vikings asked him to just run through a single gap and not worry about having to detect a gap, zone run versus, man blocking scheme. He's better in a man blocking scheme or a gap blocking scheme than he is having to kind of figure out, okay, which hole am I going to take? Because his vision is below average. And I'm not really impressed with his contact balance either. He's super fast when he gets going, but those first couple of yards, trying to stay upright, I just feel like every time I watch him run, he's usually getting tackled within the first couple of yards. There's not much elusiveness unless he gets out into the open field, which is why I would be a little bit concerned at that position. I'm hoping the Texans just cut Akers. Please cut Akers. Bring him back. Bring him back. RB3, because like we're not going to sign Kareem Hunt. I don't see that happening. So I am also excited about Ty Chandler, getting more carries this year than last year, even with Aaron Jones in the backfield. So I do agree with Dustin there.
Yeah, I also want to point out that although we had, I think it was the first preseason game of the year, although the highlights for Cam Akers looked great and good for him, he is not the unabashed RB3 on that depth chart, like the Texans depth chart. He's going to have to win it over a couple other dudes. So keep that in mind. It's not like they would have to trade for Akers. He could realistically be cut. All right, this is where the fun starts, because at wide receiver, there's mystery galore. So we know the top of the ticket. Let me see if I can figure out the fancy slide there. These are the wide receivers that Josh has elected to stick onto the 53-man roster. Speak on it.
Yeah, so I don't think, like you said, there's not a ton of mystery here at the top. Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, those are your starters moving forward, unless Jordan Addison's ankle injury lands him on IR or something, or he gets suspended for his shenanigans this summer. But other than that, I don't think there's too much question here. Jalen Naylor, I still think that he's earned a wide receiver 3 spot on this roster. We talked about it at the start of training camp. He was showing out, and our concern was, is he going to be able to keep doing that? Because he does that every single year. He does awesome at the start, and then he flames out. But we're 2 weeks into preseason, and he's still showing out. So I think at this point, it's pretty solid that he's wide receiver 3. Brandon Powell there, punt return duties, as well as just being a veteran in that wide receiver 4 spot, kind of like what the intention was last year before Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne went through some injury struggles of their own. And then Tristan Jackson, Trent Sherfield, I think those are your spread the field type of guys. Tristan Jackson's just been absolutely fantastic so far in preseason. Mm-hmm. I've really loved what I've seen out of him, and having him at wide receiver 5 is just a massive luxury for the Vikings. So I think those are kind of the 6 that I'm rolling with, where you're kind of just getting rid of a lot of the UDFA filler guys that have stuck around in training camp. I think Thayer Thomas and Lucky Jackson have shown some things. Malik Knowles as well, in terms of his, he had a kick return last weekend that was decent. So I think in a pinch, if you need a guy like, if say Nwangwu gets hurt and you got Malik Knowles on the practice squad, he can come up and fill in for a game. But I think that this is honestly, it was pretty easy for me to cut this one down and trim it to 6 at this point. Maybe they go with 5 instead of 6, depending on how they want to fill in other spots on the roster. But this is how I see it.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, Knowles caught the jump ball touchdown.
That's right,
from Jaron Hall. So another feather in his cap. I guess the only reason this would be tricky, based on what we've seen in training camp and preseason, is if you could only keep 5. I think last year in the very first depth chart release, they kept 6 with Jalen Reagor, and then ended up cutting him like a day after. I can't remember who they signed, but they brought somebody else. So initially, the Vikings weren't opposed to keeping 6. It would just be a matter of how much action would, a guy like Sherfield realistically see. I guess you can bank on somebody being hurt, because that's going to happen, probably Naylor, how it goes. But these wide receivers, I agree with this. I'm struggling. I'm going to publish mine probably Monday. I'm struggling on keeping Sherfield or not. I think it would be criminal to leave Jackson off of this. And we haven't heard much from Brandon Powell at all this training camp and preseason. Maybe that's just because everything is steady Eddie for him. Tyler, any musings on Josh's WR room?
I'm kind of surprised that, I feel like if you were to ask us the same question maybe about a couple weeks ago, we would have argued that Deshaun Jones would make the 53-man, but he really hasn't shown much in the preseason. He's shown flashes in training camp, sure, but not enough to really assert himself as one of the wide receivers who make this roster. With Brandon Powell, though, it's kind of interesting because he has those punt return duties. How involved is he going to be in the actual offense? I think Powell provides more special teams value than like Tristan Jackson or Sherfield. So, his spot's safe on the roster, but I wonder if he's going to be closer to wide receiver 5 or 6 than wide receiver 4.
Yeah, that's fair.
Say Naylor gets dinged up or whatever. Are you saying, okay, Brandon Powell, you're going to be our punt returner still, and now you're going to be our wide receiver 3? Or are they going to be like, okay, Tristan Jackson, you've shown out and every single training camp as a deep threat, or Sherfield, we want you to run block. I feel like those two guys may get more opportunities in the offense than Powell does, not because Powell's a bad player or anything like that, just because they value him more on special teams. So that's all I have to add there. But I think the top three guys are pretty clear. It's Naylor has asserted himself as wide receiver 3, and you've got Addison and Jefferson, and then it's just the other 3 guys.
I want to point out on Tristan Jackson. I can't remember if I did this on this show over the weekend or somebody else's show. Tristan Jackson's been with the team now for 4 seasons. He came during the Zimmer regime 2021, the final year. And so the guy has staying power, and good for him that he's becoming somewhat of a foregone conclusion to make the roster, because he used to just be habitually a practice squad guy. All right, more mysteries solved by Josh Frey at tight end. This one is tricky because Hawkinson probably won't be ready to start the season and will probably be placed on the PUP list. And then there's like an ongoing debate among Vikings analysts whether or not Robert Tonyan is going to make the cut. It seems like the momentum is low. Josh, what say you define or describe this tight end cut?
Yeah, so this is honestly part of the reason why I kept 6 wide receivers on the squad, because TJ Hawkinson's not going to be around. You're going to need some extra pass catchers on this roster. And I just don't think N'Keal Harry or Robert Tonyan at this point in their careers are going to be capable of carrying much of that role. But you know who is old, reliable Johnny Munt, who's suddenly over the past 2 years in Kevin O'Connell's offense figured out that, hey, if TJ Hawkinson's not around, you need me to step up, I can go catch 7 passes for 60 yards or something and add a touchdown on top of it, which is just – he's been reliable in the Vikings offense. Josh Oliver, I love this guy. His blocking is absolutely fantastic. I still think he has upside as a pass catcher as well. We didn't get to see as much of that as without Hawkinson in the lineup last year, which kind of disappointed me a little bit, but maybe that happens again this year. And then Nick Muse, I think he's been around. I think he's earned a spot on the roster. Ultra athletic tight end. He can go down the field, make plays as a receiver. He can do a little bit of blocking as well. So he makes a cut over Tonyan and Harry.
So if it's like 3rd and 7 in the first quarter of the Giants game and Sam Darnold targets a tight end for a first down, who's going to catch that pass?
I think it's going to be Johnny Munt, unfortunately. I mean, not unfortunately. Not unfortunately. I think Johnny Munt's a great player, and he's definitely proven himself as a Viking. But I do like Josh Oliver a little bit better in terms of his pass catching. Just going back and watching him in college at San Jose State, is just that dude was he was all over the place. And he couldn't block, right? Yeah, right. That was the joke on our show for a while. Is the dude turned exactly into the opposite player that he was in college, where he did blocking at the NFL level, but he couldn't catch after being a receiving tight end and couldn't block in college. So I think at this point, this dude's just a little bit of everything. He's a jack of all trades, and I hope that we get to see him a little bit more in pass catching duty. But to start week 1, I think Johnny Munt's going to hold down that role for now. Yeah, when I did my last projection, which was a few days ago, I stubbornly kept Tonyan in there because of how good he looked in June. But then, for example, Darren Wolfson is saying that he just might be washed. I guess by back spasms, what he's had, I've never thought that is it's over, back spasms. But if he hasn't done anything this summer, they might lean into somebody more like Muse, who doesn't have a injury history or isn't 30-something years old. Tyler, any beef with this part of the roster?
Honestly, yeah, I do have a little bit of beef with this. I think Robert Tonyan does make the roster, and the Vikings do what they were getting into with Tonyan when it comes to his, injuries and his ripe old age. But when he's healthy, he's still rather solid, and we don't know how long TJ Hawkinson's going to be out. And like, if Johnny Munt gets dinged up in a game, are you telling Nick Muse to be tight end 1? Because Josh Oliver is going to stay in that same blocking role. They didn't adapt their offense to give Oliver more targets when Hawkinson went down. So now you're really only down 1 receiving tight end if something happens to Munt. So you might as well just keep 4 guys. So, I mean, I would still hope that Tonyan gets 100% before Hawkinson, and you have a little more depth at that position, because Tanyan's not that bad. He's pretty solid when he's healthy. It's just his body is a bit fragile. And then we're also omitting one very crucial player on this list who 100% will make the roster. That is Sammis Reyes, because he will not count against the roster.
That's fair.
So there is zero incentive to get rid of him. So I guess I don't know if that's a technicality that he's going to make the roster, even though he's Sammis Reyes, but he's there too.
Yep.
I don't know how they would use him. I don't know anything about Sammis Reyes, but international player programs are pretty cool. And I'll leave it at that.
Tyler going through the roster with a fine-tooth comb. So on tight end, let's see, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, so there was this weird dichotomy that when the Vikings released their first depth chart, like the URL, it was like the article, it had Robert Tonyan down at like TE5, the way they organized it. And I was like, well, we overblew that one. But if you go and you Google like the active depth chart, like the organizational chart, not the article, Tanyan's listed as TE2. So I don't know what gives there. I don't know if it was just oversight by somebody. But if you follow this stuff in the minutia like we do, figuring out whether or not Tonyan makes it is going to be rather suspenseful because he has the resume to be on a tight end needy team like the Vikings because Hawkinson's hurt. But if he doesn't play all summer, it's like, what gives? All right, offensive tackle. I think this one is another one without too much mystery.
Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
You mentioned the weird roster thing here where they were listing Tonyan. So I think this is a formatting issue because there's no way Josh Oliver is on the second team. He is like the second tight end is the blocking guy. I think that what they did here accidentally was it was supposed to be TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, Robert Tonyan, N'Keal Harry, Johnny Montrain. I don't know. I'm just going to give up right there because that doesn't even sound right. But I saw someone on Twitter argue that for a while the Vikings had some sort of formatting issue going on with the depth chart where like instead of horizontally, they listed them vertically. I don't know. But
well, we choose to believe that Dwight McLaughlin's fancy placement on that same list is purposeful. That is what we're doing on VikesNow on this Wednesday. All right, offensive tackle, please. This one should be pretty straightforward. You want to walk us through that one before we get into the interior, Josh?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, starters Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill. No questions there. David Questenberry, I think he's a swing tackle. He can play pretty much everywhere. Walter Rouse, who was 6th round pick this year, right? Or was that 5th round? I don't even remember at this point.
6th
round. It was 6th. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I think he makes it. And then Jeremy Flax, Doug Nestor are the cuts. Yeah, I think they kept 4 offensive tackles last year. I don't think that really changes.
Rouse, notably a alumnus of VikesNow a couple months ago, talking to Yannick Eckhart and myself. Interior offensive line gets a little bit more dicey here because, kind of like the Tonyan smoke or lack thereof, Dalton Reisner has been theorized as a roster cut. And there's some credible rumors that say that he already knows he's on the way out. Did you keep Reisner, Josh?
I did not.
Ooh,
I have him cut. I think there's a couple things that play into that. When I went through this interior, first of all, I tried to keep it to 25 players offense, 25 players defense, 3 special teamers, just to make it even. I think that's kind of how the Vikings have kind of typically done it in the past. I think most NFL teams try to do that as well. But with this interior offensive line, I tried to maximize versatility with my 5 guys that I had left. Blake Brandel, I think he's earned that spot at the left guard. I don't think there's too many questions there. Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, I think those are pretty surefire starters at this point as well. Michael Juergens, I'm keeping him around because he can play guard, he can play center. Same thing with Dan Feeney. He can play guard, he can play center. With Dalton Reisner, he can play left guard, but can he play right guard? We don't know. Can he play center? Probably not. And the fact that he hasn't practiced, he hasn't appeared at any preseason games, dude's been hurt. And when you're hurt, you aren't really able to make a name for yourself in training camp. You aren't really able to fight for your roster spot. So at the end of the day, I think that he wasn't exactly a coveted guy in free agency to begin with. The Vikings kind of brought him back just to be like, hey, let's see what you can do in training camp. And he hasn't shown up so far in training camp to practice. So I think at the end of the day, if you really wanted to keep that extra guy around, Tyrese Robinson, he's played guard, both spots. He's played offensive tackle. Spencer Rollins, same story. You want some extra versatility there. I think those 2 guys are a lot better options than Reisner at this point, especially given the fact that he hasn't practiced and he hasn't fought for that roster spot. So that's kind of what my thought process was going through this interior offensive line.
So this is very fair, what you've come up with, and I actually agree with it. The people that are usually right that chatter in my ear claim that Reisner is going to be cut, and I just have to accept that. But I will say this: there is nobody that can convince me that Dan Feeney is a better offensive lineman than Dalton Reisner. So it's weird that we've got to a spot based on the rumor mill that's like, oh no, Reisner's gone because we got Dan Feeney. He's just not as good. And I think when we look back at on Reisner's career here or elsewhere, it's gonna be this weird case study about like this guy was really good and nobody ever wanted him. Maybe it's because he can't run block. I don't know. Tyler, what say you on the interior before we pivot to defense?
Yeah, you and Josh are firmly in the acceptance stage of grief when it comes to Dalton Reisner. I'm still in the denial phase. I if they actually go through with this, because I have heard that the scuttlebutt is that they're going to cut Reisner. Like I've seen multiple people on Twitter say that. Like, so I mean, I get it. He's been hurt, but you can't convince me that Dan Feeney or Michael Juergens, by the way, who has not had a great preseason. He looks like he's getting mauled out there every single time against second, third stringers. You can't convince me that both of those guys are better than Dalton Reisner when he's healthy. It's just keep Juergens or keep Feeney. Keep one of them. Don't keep both because neither of them are good. And if you want to believe PFF, which is questionable when it comes to this, then Ed Ingram's been bad, quote unquote. But
he got a bad shake this weekend.
It's people who watch film say otherwise on Ingram. I know Tyler Fornes is a really big fan of his. So still, though, if Ingram plays bad into the regular season, that's why you have Reisner. He's supposed to be the contingency plan in case Ingram or Brandel, which is more unlikely, plays bad. So I don't see the upside in getting rid of him for a practice squad caliber player in Juergens who isn't ready to start, and Dan Feeney, who's a journeyman at this point and has little value.
So, yeah, that's so, if I didn't have the hints from the rumor mill, I would be leading the charge. Like, how this is ridiculous that they would cut Reisner. But I have screenshots that are credible that Reisner is going to be cut. So, all right, this is going to be a little bit longer episode.
The final argument I make here is just the best ability is availability, and Dalton Reisner's not available at this point. And I mean, at the end of the day, if they cut him, nobody has shown any signs that they actually want to sign this guy. So maybe he gets healthy a few weeks down the road and the Vikings just bring him back and they get rid of one of these depth guys too. So I think that's another thing to just think about is if this guy goes on to the free agency market again, there just hasn't been any indication that this guy is coveted on the open market. So there's a very decent chance that if he gets healthy again, the Vikings just bring him back.
What's the old saying, Dustin?
Which one?
You can't make the club in the tub.
Oh yeah. That's the one. Yeah, Reisner, if the way that we talk about him or the world treats him, there's no way it sounds like a guy who started 50-something games in his career. Yeah. Like, it's so strange. We talk about him like he is this absolute fringe bubble guy who needs just one shot. So weird. All right, defensive line. This one is tricky.
This one's tough.
Arguably the trickiest one on the roster, I would say, because of youth and old, I guess, veteran players. Speak on it.
So I think Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, Jerry Tillery are pretty much set in stone as the starters at this point. But man, I love me some Levi Drake Rodriguez. And if I could convince myself that the Vikings could sneak him onto the practice squad, maybe I could consider seeing them cutting him. But at this point, he's put together 2 really great preseason games. And I think that if the Vikings were to cut him, there would be NFL teams lining up to claim this guy. And I just don't think that they'd risk that at this point. And then Jonah Williams, he's another veteran presence. And I think that he at least can play a role as a rotational guy on that defensive line, which leaves us without James Lynch, Jaquelin Roy. Sorry, I keep on pronouncing that name wrong. Toki Taimani, and then Tyler Manoa and Jalen Redmond on the outside looking in. Jaquelin Roy, I love this guy coming out of that draft, the 2023 draft. And so far, it just hasn't really clicked, it seems, in Minnesota. They put together a couple pretty disappointing preseason games. So I have pretty much from the beginning said that roster spot is going to be between Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jaquelin Roy, and Levi Drake Rodriguez has definitely shown a lot more at this point than Roy has. So that's why I ultimately went with him.
Yeah, they got to keep Levi, just because. And then I would say that there's been, because of his preseason performance for Taki Taimani, there's been recent steam for him. I don't know if it's to make the team, but he notably would be like the one nose tackle type at all, unless you consider Levi a nose tackle. Levi looks like Vita Vea out there with the hair and everything.
He does, yeah.
But Taimani, if the University of Oregon is correct with his weight, he's 330 pounds, and the Vikings really don't have too many dudes like that. So there could be a little hint there that he would be a run stuffer in the middle. I think when I get down to brass tacks, I think I'm going to keep Jaquelin Roy over Jonah Williams. That's mainly because of the youth angle, but I haven't locked that in just yet. Tyler, any beef here?
No beef necessarily, but I want to pose a question for Josh. You were very much on the James Lynch hype train a couple months ago about him potentially making the team when we signed him. What happened? Was it just Levi Drake Rodriguez and his emergence, or was it, Lynch's performance? What changed?
I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. I think Lynch has been okay, but I'm just really impressed with what I've seen with Drake Rodriguez at this point, and it's a 53-man roster again. And if I could keep all of them, I'd keep them all, but we just can't. So I had to part ways with one of these guys, and it ultimately, I think, with Lynch coming off that injury, I don't think he's gonna. I could very well see him coming back to the roster again, kind of like a Reisner situation, where if they need an extra guy and one of these guys doesn't pan out, maybe Lynch just comes right back in a couple weeks. But with Rodriguez, I just think that he's been so good, and with his preseason games, I just don't think that they can afford to let him hit the waiver wire.
I want to propose something here as well. I don't think this will happen, but I wouldn't mind if it happened. What if the Vikings kept Taki Taimani? If I botched that, I'm sorry. But what if they kept him, moved Harrison Phillips out to defensive end? So now Taimani is their starting nose, Harrison Phillips on one side, and he's your best defensive lineman. And you have a rotation of Jerry Tillery, Levi Drake Rodriguez, and Jonah Williams, and you just say bye-bye Jonathan Bullard.
I just think they love Jonathan Bullard. He wouldn't be back for a third season if the team just didn't love him.
Shamar Stephen reincarnated.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of there with you. I don't necessarily love everything about Jonathan Bullard in terms of his play, but I think that he's just a veteran guy that's been around this club for so long that the Vikings just they see him as a leader on that defensive line probably, and that's why he's making this roster. And there just hasn't really been a ton of signs that say otherwise at this point, I guess. But I'm with you with Taimani. I had him actually making the roster in my last roster projection on Vikings territory, just because he is a huge guy and a nose tackle type presence that the Vikings just really don't have at this point. So
at all.
But yeah, exactly. But I'd love to see him back on the practice squad and eventually moving back into that roster.
I always, when we do this exercise or show like this, I always wonder, let's say the NFL announced in January, hey, we're expanding rosters, 63-man rosters.
It'd be so easy.
No, I wonder if it would be tricky to, when we get to 64, 65, we'd be like, oh God, who do I cut? Or if because we've done this for years, it'd be really easy. I digress. All right, this next one, I'm going to preface it. This is outside linebacker. On June 1st, 2024, I asked all Vikings territory writers, who is one surprise guy that's going to make this roster? One person replied with Bo Richter, and he is on the show today, and Josh Frey. It looks like he is trending to be correct. So I'll give you your flowers for that, undeniably. Tell us about this edge room, and in particular, Richter.
I think Bo Richter was just fantastic at Air Force. I love his pass rushing ability. He's super athletic, and we've seen it so far in Vikings training camp and preseason. This dude's all over the field all the time, makes plays, and I think that he, especially with Gabriel Murphy being hurt, I think that really solidifies him in this roster spot. And I think the biggest note here is Patrick Jones not making the roster. But at the end of the day, this dude's entering his final contract or his final year of his rookie contract. And I don't know. I did not love what I saw in 2023. Haven't loved what I've seen so far in 2024. So I think that the Vikings ultimately part ways with him. Andre Carter, he's another guy that's just kind of underwhelmed after being a really premier UDFA signing last year. I don't know if it's just transitioning to the NFL or if it's the weight that everybody was complaining about last year when the Vikings brought him in. He's just super lanky, but I think he goes to the practice squad as well. But yeah, that's kind of how I saw this outside linebacker spot rolling.
And then Tyler and I did a show, I think about 6 weeks ago to 2 months ago, and I wasn't sure because of Gabriel Murphy. I wasn't sure if Jihad Ward was going to make this roster. Tyler was emphatic that it would happen. And then if you watch the Vikings version of the preseason telecast, in quarter number 2, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah joined PA and basically made it sound like Ward was a foregone conclusion to play a lot this season. So he should be on everybody's rosters, Jihad Ward, that is. Tyler, before we get to inside linebacker, what say you on these edges?
Yeah, I would be ecstatic if these are the 5 because Bo Richter looks like a mini Jared Allen out there. He just reminds me of him. And then, Jihad Ward has that versatility where he can play some snaps on the defensive line and at outside linebacker. And then your top 3 is obviously Turner, Van Ginkel, and Bernard. So, it sucks for Gabriel Murphy because I do think he's flashed, but just, you can't make the club in the tub. And oddly enough, his brother, Grayson Murphy for the Dolphins, got hurt recently. So I'm not sure if it's just family genetics to get hurt at the worst possible times to try and make a 53-man roster. If Grayson Murphy does make the roster for the Dolphins, they're kind of short on edge rushers. I wouldn't be surprised if they just pair both UCLA brothers and say, all right, Gabriel and Grayson, go for it. We're starting Chop Robinson and Mohamed Kamara, and we've got the corpse of Ogba out there. Let's see what you can do. But, I mean, for the Vikings, I also wouldn't be surprised if they kept Patrick Jones. I don't like him either, but they do. They really like him, and that's just kind of one of those Jonathan Bullard situations where you have a player who is more valued by the team than the fan base, and it just wouldn't shock me if he made the 53 for that reason alone, just to spite me. And then Bo Richter goes somewhere else and balls out, and I would be very sad.
Oh, yeah, that better not happen.
You and me both.
Final note on the outside linebacker room. This is the, sans any injury, this is the deepest Vikings edge room in years. And that's pretty cool to say after they lost their best defensive player. And maybe,
and DJ Wanham.
Yep, and Wanham. Yeah. Yeah, those guys, we had this full overhaul, and somehow it got better, at least on paper. All right, inside linebacker. We got 3 spots left. ILB, Josh.
Yeah, Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman at the top of the roster. Obviously, I think those 2 guys are pretty much solidified starters. Brian Asamoah, he's been disappointing a little bit to this point in his NFL career after being a 3rd-round pick. I think injuries might have played a role in that last year. So hopefully he gets back onto the field this season and balls out and finally proves that it was a correct choice by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to select him out of Oklahoma. And then Kamu Grugier-Hill, I think he's just there for veteran presence instead of some of the UDFAs or the recent free agent signing of, is it Jordan Kunashik, something like that? Is that correct? I don't know. Sorry if I butchered that, but sorry, Jordan. And then Dallas Cann is also on the outside looking in, but this was another pretty straightforward one for me.
If Asamoah makes the team, and I hope he does, if he gets a safety this year, they better not put the damn ball on the 2-yard line just for shits and giggles. I could not believe that. Maybe it wasn't an exact safety, but the ball didn't belong on the 2-yard line.
Yep.
All right. Cornerback is very thick. Let's see how you did with that one.
Cornerback, especially with Gilmore coming in, is a very interesting spot at this point. But anyways, Byron Murphy, Stephon Gilmore, Shaquille Griffin, I think those are your starters at this point. Fabian Moreau, I still think that he's been one of the bigger surprises so far in training camp at this position. And then Caleb Evans, you could have made the argument that this guy's on the outside looking in, but especially with Andrew Booth getting traded away and then some of the injuries like Mekhi Blackman, I think that there's enough spots now that he just ends up making it. And Dwight McGlothern has just been fantastic as a UDFA pickup this spring. Props to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah for nailing it again. But yeah, that's how cornerback rolls out. And then Nashawn Wright, the guy that they ultimately got in return for Andrew Booth, I don't think he makes it. He just hasn't been great at Dallas either. It was kind of a swap of two guys that were higher end picks that just haven't really panned out all that much. So I think Wright's on the outside looking in. And then that entire list, Duke Shelley, sorry to say it, buddy, but I don't think you're making it either, unfortunately. We're not going to be able to relive 2022. But at the end of the day, I mean, Dwight McGlothern's kind of looking like he might trend towards being the Duke Shelley of 2024, especially if at the top of the depth chart, like Stephon Gilmore gets hurt. He's 34, 35 at this point. He definitely could miss a few games here and there. Shaq Griffin's finally returning to practice, but who knows? He's another older guy. Maybe he misses a couple games, but I feel pretty solid about this cornerback room, all being said at this point.
So Najee Thompson's on the pup, or are you just cutting them all together?
I think that they might try to just put him on the practice squad. I like Najee Thompson for his special teams abilities, and maybe this is going to completely bite me in the ass in a couple weeks when they do release this roster. But I don't know, especially with Gilmore coming in, I would have kept Thompson on this roster if Gilmore hadn't been signed, just because you've got that spot and he's fantastic on special teams. But with Gilmore coming in, I just don't know if they've necessarily got the roster spot to keep a guy who's so special teams focused on the team at this point, you know?
I want to lift up Yannick Eckhart, who's on this show every so often and is the editor of Purple PTSD. Not even kidding. He has told me twice that he believes Dwight McGlothern is the best cornerback on this roster.
He looks like it.
Yep, getting that out there, like not like, oh, just best of the young guys. He says he's the best cornerback on this roster. And then I want to lift up something I said earlier a couple days ago on Shaq Griffin. That's great that he's on this team, and I hope that he provides outstanding depth, or even if he starts, that's great. But he was certifiably released by the Texans last year in the middle of the season just because. They were like, we don't need you. We're going to playoffs. Yep. We don't need you. And it's weird that for a while there, maybe even still, he's the Vikings starting solution. He was completely cast away by a team last year that was heading towards the AFC divisional round. So it's a little weird that we've all just been like, yeah, we got Shaq Griffin. That's the fix. Some other team flat out didn't want him. All right, this one is contentious. For here, I'm trending toward keeping a Caleb Evans on the outside because I want to keep Lewis Seen on the next slide. That's just me. Tyler, what do you got on corners before we wrap it up with safeties?
Yeah, I would be shocked if they kept Lewis Seen over Caleb Evans. Like that is a hot take, but I respect it. With Najee Thompson, I just don't think his role is that important anymore because special teams rules have changed, because now on kickoffs, everyone runs at the exact same time. So the gunner position of having just one really fast guy tackle someone out in the open field isn't really the same. And then they tried switching him to safety. He got hurt. That didn't really work. The depth chart now lists him as a corner again. So I don't think the Vikings know exactly what to do with Najee Thompson at this point, because his entire role, his reason for job security, just doesn't really exist with the new kickoff rule. I guess maybe on punt returns, but you know, you're not going to keep a guy because he's really good in punt return coverage on the 53-man roster. And the fact that he's hurt just really further adds to the speculation that he just might be cut outright. They might not even want to keep him. As far as just the cornerbacks you are keeping, I think this is spot on. If they keep 6, like those are your 6 guys: McGlothern, Evans, Moreau, Griffin, Gilmore, and Murphy. I think Murphy can have a bit of a bounce back year if he plays a lot more slot snaps. And, you know, you could make the argument that it would be wise for the Vikings to extend him now as opposed to waiting after the season, just because, you know, Gilmore and Griffin are going to be free agents. And Byron Murphy is kind of like, before Gilmore got here and before Griffin got here, he was the veteran in the room. And the Vikings will probably go big game hunting for some young upcoming corners, maybe like an AJ Terrell or a Paulson Adebo. But, you know, if the Vikings want some sort of continuity, they should really consider extending Murphy now, despite the down year. But I absolutely agree with Josh on this entire 6 cornerback thing here.
Josh, the final spot on this roster, because there's no mystery on special teams anymore. thanks to Will Reichert being a badass, is safety. And there is no mystery here, I guess, besides Bobby McCain. But this is your chance to give me the Lewis Cine speech, because you have him on the outside looking in, which will have meant in hindsight that he had his one moment and the Vikings were like, yeah, we don't believe that really happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that Lewis Cine finally had his moment, but I also think it's 2-3 years too late at this point, where he had obviously that devastating leg injury his rookie year, but even before then, he wasn't really getting snaps. Then last year he comes back, doesn't get a ton of snaps, and now he's finally starting to show some things in year 3. But at this point, the Vikings have kind of already replaced him on this depth chart with Cameron Bynum showing out last year. Josh Metellus emerging as just a do-it-all and just being a badass all over the field with lining up at like defensive tackle, linebacker, safety. Ask him to do anything, he's capable of doing it. And then Theo Jackson, I think, in the limited opportunities. Yeah, exactly. And the limited opportunities that he got last year were just out of this world, just with what we saw out of him. And then I think they keep Jay Ward just because he's got versatility to play all over that defensive backfield. And Lewis Cine, it just doesn't feel like there's a spot on this roster for him unless you want to keep 6 safeties again, which I don't know if they can do that and keep all those cornerbacks around at this point.
They'd have to do 5 corners. So basically getting rid of Evans on yours probably, or Moreau, if that was all fool's gold. It'll be 5 and 6. I don't think it can be 6 and 6, in my opinion, because then you're getting really heavy in the secondary and those guys aren't all going to play. You're just keeping guys because you don't want them to hit free agency. All right, Tyler, this is your scene speech, and then we are done for the day.
I mean, I think he's getting cut. Exactly what Josh said. I'm actually more passionate here about the Jay Ward, Bobby McCain thing going on. I would swap them. I'm keeping Bobby McCain. I'm cutting Jay Ward.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's a pet peeve of mine, but one of the things I always kind of chuckle at is when someone argues, hey, Jay Ward has versatility, because he can play 2 positions, but he plays them both horribly.
Okay. That's fair, I guess.
I swear, every time I heard Jay Ward's name last season, it was because he was committing a penalty on like a field goal attempt. Or,
he did do that a lot.
Like a strange amount of times it happened. And you're like, why is it always Jay Ward? And like, he hasn't looked good at corner when they kind of gave him some snaps there. And he hasn't really looked good at safety either. I think Bobby McCain knows this defense more, and I think he's made more plays. So if we're making the argument that we should cut Cine and cut our losses or trade him because, he's just not going to be a fit for this team, we should do the same thing with Jay Ward because, at least with Lewis Cine, you can make the case that, well, he's a former first-round pick. Let's see this through. Jay Ward isn't. He's a mid to late-round guy, and I don't think he's really done enough to keep that 5th safety spot. So I would prefer the Vikings to keep Bobby McCain.
Yeah, I prefaced this spot by saying just do Cine, but we made this one pretty suspenseful, especially for the hard-hitting Bobby McCain, the folks that like him. All right, guys, so that was it in total. That was 53. We will have clarity. Special teams is a no-brainer there. Josh, anything from you?
Not too much. You mind if I do a college football corner really quick?
No, go ahead.
All right. So obviously week 0 this weekend, but there was a really interesting development this week where Boise State named Maddox Madsen their starting quarterback over a former 5-star who transferred from USC. It was supposed to be the heir apparent to Caleb Williams. And Boise State's a team that it's Malachi Nelson, who's now their backup quarterback, who used to be a 5-star, was like the number 5 quarterback in the class. And Madsen was like 110 or something, like way down the list. And Boise State's a team that, I don't know, they're going to win the Mountain West almost assuredly. And they might be a team that with the new 12-team college football playoff, I think there might be a little bit of a bubble team to maybe sneak into that 12 spot. And it's just something to keep an eye on.
So they're good is what you're saying.
They're good. And yeah. I think with their new quarterback, it's going to be something to keep an eye on when things officially get rolling here in a couple of weeks for them. So just something that was interesting that popped up this week.
Yeah, all right, folks. You bet on Boise State and their quarterback upset special.
And
Already
keep an eye
underway.
on them for the draft too, because they got a lot of defensive studs that
Oh,
the
really?
Vikings
Okay.
could have an eye on.
Now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
All right, Tyler. Anything from you, sir?
Will Reichard might as well be my Lord Savior at this point because
Yep.
I feel weirdly confident in him given the Vikings' history at kicker. He is surgical, like a heart surgeon, just precise. It feels like every kick, whether it's a regular 27th yarder or a 50+ yarder, it just feels like another Tuesday for him. So yeah, this might be our kicker for the next decade. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, he needed to hit that game winner, as weird as it sounds in the preseason. A preseason win is, in fact, meaningless, but he basically could not miss that because imagine waking up the following morning, that Sunday, and thinking, oh, we're screwed again.
Did
But
it
then
again.
him making it really wasn't a big deal because he was
Yeah.
supposed to hit a 38-yarder, but he could not miss it, and he did not. All right, guys, thanks a lot. We'll chat with you next week, okay?
Sounds good.
Later.